We're getting feedback, right?
So it's just preparing a live stream on YouTube now. It's going to take a second.
I can't hear him.
So it's just preparing a stream on YouTube now. It's going to take a second.
I can't hear him.
Just preparing a stream on YouTube now. It's going to take a second. Okay, so I think I have to.
Now muted.
I'm at the door.
You go ahead.
Yeah. Only to the board member.
Oh,
Okay, we're live on YouTube, so we can go ahead whenever you're ready.
okay. Welcome to the July 29th meeting of the Brooklyn Board of Education. We have attendance. We have established a quorum. We're going to call the meeting to order. And we're going to skip to where we left off a week ago. This is a continuation. This meeting is a continuation of the meeting that began on July 22nd and was disrupted. So we are going to begin with Board of Education committee reports.
May I have?
Does anybody have any committees that they have attended or
I don't have anything.
you have nothing? No. Okay, then we will move on to representatives of committees. Anybody been to a meeting as a representative of the board?
Unfortunately, the rec department meeting was.
If you want to talk.
So the meetings have been, no, there have been
It was
no,
just during our special meeting on a Monday night. It was
Okay.
the same time, so I had to
Okay.
let them know. So I could not attend.
so we will move on to old business and we will get an update of the PV projects. I'll turn that over to Patty. You may have noticed trees down in the back.
The solar project is well underway. We have staging set up around the building, both at the elementary school and the middle school. The tree removal has begun. We've been very clean and efficient with that work. The trees have been removed that will impact the solar production due to shading or trees that might be in buildings. And then in addition, there are many pine trees that have an algae growing on them that are dying. And so the tree company, well, here has been working on this as well. So we have a little bit more work. They have been grinding the stumps down below the surface, the ground level. So it's a very clean and neat process. So I think that's it. They do expect to start being on the roof by the end of the week. So looking forward to that as well. Soon we are going to put together a press release with CSW, who are the project managers, to share that with the community, just to kind of give them an update about where we are.
Perfect. Okay, so let's go to new business and we'll just have talk about the draft for the reopening plan for 2021.
Okay. So the draft plan has been discussed at many different levels and through multiple Zoom meetings with parents and staff, certified, non-certified, administrators, custodians, secretaries, nurses. I've continued to engage in area conversations with other superintendents, administrators, and as well as the state level. So this draft plan was due to the state last Friday. It was submitted to the state, and it really is an organic plan, which means that it will be changing as we get guidance or direction from the State Department of Education. So as of
Patty,
this
I'm
morning,
gonna,
we were
Patty, I'm gonna hold
notified
on a
that
second.
the
Patty, can you,
draft advance achieve document was updated and there were additional addendum put into it. So I'll share a little bit about that. Our plan does not reflect that yet, but we can talk about it tonight. So for some, I think this might be a repeat, and so you will hear a few things that are the same, but for the purpose of some people who may not have heard about the plan or read the plan or followed the plan through, I want to be able to go ahead and share that with you. The plan has been communicated to the board previously, and it will be nice to have the board endorse the plan, although it's not required by the state that the board endorse or approve the plan. The state, in fact, will not be approving the plan either. They are looking at the plan and providing some feedback if needed, but as long as you're following the basic guidelines, the plan will be on file as needed. So I think the one thing that I've talked about before is that the big overarching idea is that we're all very happy to have our students come back to school. We're looking forward to it. We want to do it in the healthiest way that we can. We would like to keep the kids in school as long as possible, which means that we need to follow as many mitigation strategies in order to reduce this transmission of the virus as possible. So that, I think, is the object or the objective of the state and everyone else as well. Well, I wouldn't say everyone, but of the state. They would like to get the kids back to school, and we too would like to have the kids back to school. So our overarching priorities are the health and wellness of our students. That includes getting the students back, connecting with those students, supporting their social emotional well-being. We've done some work around some curriculum that will be implemented from pre-K through grades 8. We want to address the wellness. We want to address equity for all students. We want to address diversity and social justice issues that have recently become part of our life. And our goal would be to increase the digital literacy of our students. So this plan has 3 parts to it. The initial part is for all students to return to school. If the governor, on a conversation this evening, and the deputy governor, but the commissioner of education have all talked about the fact that we want to start with a full reopening, but that may not be possible in all places, and that we may be starting with the hybrid model, and then so that there is some more guidance coming out about that. So the plan has really 4 pieces. The first one is a full reopen. The second one is a hybrid model. So if the virus becomes more prevalent in this area and it becomes necessary to socially distance our students further than where we are, then we would go to a hybrid model. The third option would be a full distance learning model. I don't know who's, oh, that's Thomas.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute it.
So a full distance model would mean that everybody goes home like we did in March. The fourth option really is a parent opt-out option. So if a parent, for whatever reason, chooses not to send their child to school, they can opt out. All they need to do is inform the school district that they wish to opt out, which means keeping their children home. And we, as a district, would provide them instruction through a distance learning model. the fifth model has always been in existence, but that's a homeschool model. So if you choose to keep your child home, but do not want to participate in the district's district learning instruction, you could offer your own home instruction. And so that would be considered homeschooling. So this plan gives parents choices. They may choose to follow the district's decision around which of the plans we're in, which of the phases we're in. We're either in a full return, a hybrid, or a distance learning, or they may choose to keep their children home and receive distance learning. So the bulk of this plan is really talking about all the mitigation strategies that we have to employ in the different settings. And so the mitigation, the purpose of that is really to reduce the transmission of the virus. So there are many, many pieces of that. The primary focus for the Brooklyn Public Schools and most schools is to cohort children. The idea of cohorting children is that they will be one group of children where they can, they're not crossing over to different cohorts. So in our model from pre-K through grade 8, children are going to be in a class cohort, which is basically their homeroom cohort, where they will spend their day and receive their instruction. The least amount of crossing or mixing of groups of students, the better, according to the CDC and the state, to reduce the possible transmission of the virus. So what does that instruction look like? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So we've got cohorts, we've got masks. We are required to wear masks when we're in the school building. We're required to wear masks when we're on the school bus. So anytime you're in the building, you must have a mask that covers your face and your nose, or your mouth and your nose. And so obviously we need to build in some breaks for children. So there would be breaks, a break in the morning, there would be a lunch break where they would have, obviously remove it so they can eat, and have an outdoor break for students kindergarten through grade 6. That looks like recess. 7th and 8th graders will still have an outdoor break after lunch, and then an afternoon mask break. Guidance today that was received today indicates that from the Office of Early Childhood, preschool students will not be required to wear face masks in class. That was received today. So that does not reflect in our plan that was submitted on Friday. We will revise that. We will resubmit that. It talked about hygiene, teaching kids about hygiene, hand washing, how do you put a mask on, how do you take it off, some of those things. We talked about signage and using visual supports, about understanding what is social distancing and how far is that. And so we're developing strategies that have signs that show one way in the hallway, which side do kids walk on, that they should stay on their side of the hallway. We've got little, you've seen them everywhere, little dots on the floor or big dots on the floor that will indicate how far 6 feet is from the next child if they're standing in the hall. But we're being very creative about those dots. The kids will be excited about those, I think. We're using some really fun designs and animals and geometric shapes and skip counting. And so there'll be some fun things that kids will, we hope, enjoy. We're developing other protocols for when to use a bathroom, how many children are in the bathroom, what do you do if there's already 2 children in the bathroom, where do you wait, how do you wait? So we're going to teach kids about those. So our staff are beginning to develop ideas about how to create little commercials that will push out to our children through different medias that gives them a sneak preview of what it looks like here and what those procedures might be. Our school nurses are also developing some little commercials as well. How do you know if your child's well enough to go to school? What will happen if your child, what should you do if a child is sick? They're going to help to talk about what does good hand washing look like. So they're going to help us around some of the hygiene and health issues, while the schools will develop some procedures and protocol guidance for our students. Other mitigation strategies, we have shared some pictures of what the classroom looks like on social media, but I will also share them again with you right now. This is an example of what a 6th grade classroom might look like. That classroom shows 16 student desks, and on each desk is a desk shield. That desk shield will be used when students need to eat lunch in their classroom. So they can remove their mask and have some kind of barrier to help the reduction of spreading any virus. This is an example of a 3rd grade class, also 16 desks with desk shields. Those desk shields will not be used all day long because they're not needed. If we have face masks and we're trying to maximize our social distancing, then we will not be using those shields. It's really for the mealtime when we really need them. Things like recess, we're gonna try to spread the children out by grade level around the property. So there might be a group behind the 3rd and 4th grade wing, or 2 groups out there, one on one side of the grass yard, one on the other side. In the front of the school building, they might be split into sections in the front of the building. Over on the middle school side, they will also be split into areas of the playground. In order to reduce the mixing of cohorts, so that if one child or one staff member gets sick in a cohort, it doesn't spread throughout multiple cohorts. That's the whole idea around cohorts. And that's our primary focus, is creating cohorts that will reduce the transmission. If one person becomes sick, we don't lose 100 kids to having to be quarantined because they've come in contact with one sick cohort, one sick member of a cohort. We are providing bus monitors. So that was a recommendation from the state, that we provide a bus monitor to support students to board the bus in an orderly fashion, make sure they have a mask on. That first on moves all the way directly to the back of the bus, and they take seats in the order that they get on the bus. So it doesn't matter how old you are or where you used to sit last year or where you want to sit, you're going to sit in the order in which you board the bus. And then when you get off the bus, the people in the front will get off first and move that way. That reduces the amount of kids crossing over on a bus. There was some conversation about, how many students can go on a bus. So the guidance right now from the state that we are operating under is that buses can be filled to near capacity. As a result of that, we are encouraging any parents that want to transport their children to and from school to please do that. It will help to reduce the number of kids on the bus. It helps to reduce your children's exposure to other kids on the bus. That's one less cohort of kids that your child would be a part of. In order to achieve this healthy educational environment, we need to adjust our instructional day. So our instructional day, we have created a 45-minute delay each morning. So instead of starting at 8:30 in the morning, we plan to start at 9:15. The reason for that is so that teachers have the opportunity to have a planning period in order to prepare their lessons. Teachers will be providing lessons to the children that are sitting in front of them, and they will each be recording a mini lesson. A mini lesson is a 10 to 15 minute introduction to a concept that they're going to be teaching that day. any students that are in a distance learning model will be able to view that mini lesson on the next day and receive instruction from a teacher that's going to coordinate the distance learning. So again, teachers will record mini lessons. The next day, a distance learning teacher will be pushing out videos and instruction to the students that are in distance learning. Our distance learning model for students that opt out, and eventually, if we end up with a full distance learning model, are going to look really the same. All students report on a schedule. That schedule might be at 9:15, or whatever time, 9:15, they log in, they have math class. The instructor is going to see them, will record their attendance, will share the lesson with them, and will give them their assignment for math. That teacher may step away, not physically, but away from that group of students and go to a different group of students. The teacher's still going to be there available to students, but they might be introducing a mini lesson to the next group of students. Now it's 10 o'clock, students now need to sign in, be visible, take attendance, and they're going to receive a mini lesson in the next content area, for example, science, language arts, whatever it might be. So students will continually be held to a schedule and will be responsible to check in at a certain time. I know that as a board, we've talked about some of the challenges that working families face, and we are trying to look at a schedule that would be able to provide some support for students that need to work on a second shift. Students or parents that might need some second shift. So we're in the planning stages of that, but we understand that that might be a need for families. And so we are looking into that to see if we can come up with a reasonable solution for students and families that might need that support. So we talked about a shortened day. So school starts at 9:15. The Park and Rec, Brooklyn Parks and Recreation will continue to offer the traditional before and after school program for parents that need to drop off early or pick up their children late. They've already been taking registrations for that. I believe they're almost full already. But because we're starting 45 minutes late, we are coordinating with the Brooklyn Parks and Recreation to offer a drop off. You would need to sign up, but if your work schedule prohibits you from dropping students at 9:15 because you're used to dropping them at 8:30, the Parks and Rec and the Brooklyn Public Schools are going to collaborate so that we can offer some spots to students to come in at that 8:30 to 9:15 time, so that we're not, hopefully not negatively impacting parents. We know that all of this is an impact to someone somewhere in different ways, but we're trying to do everything we can to support families and students. So just quickly, the Brooklyn Parks and Rec, the town of Brooklyn is going to offer that 45-minute drop off. You have to sign up at no cost to a family. So I'm going to show you what that might look like. This is the Brooklyn Auditorium, the middle school auditorium. Those yellow pieces of paper represent one child in that seat. The side here where you see two yellow dots or two yellow pieces of paper are siblings because they can sit next to each other. And the rest are spread out further. So in that model, we can accommodate about 80 students. So we think that we're trying to create supports and accommodations so that we can successfully open, create a healthy learning environment, and try to minimize the impact to these changes in the schedule to families. Other mitigation strategies is we're looking at ventilation and increasing airflow in the air handlers, requiring windows to remain open, not allowing the use of hand dryers, and if there are fans, it's only to blow air out of a classroom. It doesn't blow air around a classroom. We talk about opening the building up to have air exchange in the morning, in the afternoon, after students, before students arrive and after they leave. So those are some of the strategies that we can use to, that are recommended for us to use to assist. Let's see. So one of the other things is just reducing the amount of traffic in the building, in the offices, in the nurse's office. So we've had conversations with the nurses. We're following the NDDH guidelines. So they follow the CDC guidelines, and they're our local Department of Health. And so we're going to work closely with them. We've participated in trainings with them and conversations with them. So we're following guidance that they've provided to us. We are creating isolation rooms. So if a student is not well, or we suspect that they might have symptoms that mirror COVID or the coronavirus, then they would be in an isolation room, they would be monitored, parents would be called, and then they would need to go home. Again, we would be watching those very carefully. We're going to work very carefully with families to inform them about what to look for. If their child does not seem well, that they should stay home. We're going to require the same thing of staff, that if they're not well, they need to stay home. Like other things like providing classrooms with first aid kits. You know, so there are many, many strategies that we have in place. So I think those are the big pieces. Each one of the schools is developing specific schedules and rotations. So students will still receive art class, art instruction, music instruction. They won't be singing. They won't be playing wind instruments and sharing that kind of germs, but they will be having some music instruction. We're working on what does that look like. So we're adapting. The middle school will have Spanish instruction, grades 6, 7, and 8. Am I missing one? STEAM instruction will occur at the elementary school. So one of the important things is that we need to be prepared, and that's what the plan has said. We've got a structure in place so that we can shift or pivot quickly from full and distance, all students in the district, to maybe a hybrid, back to all students, or maybe to a distance learning model. And then when it's safe enough and healthy enough for students to return, that we can then adjust back to one of the other models. So that's our goal, and that's our plan. One of the things that our district has talked about is creating healthy schools, and healthy means addressing their emotional, academic well-being, and their health. And so we intend to approach it that way, and we intend to instruct students in a way that that's our focus. And so we do have to academically address their needs and assess where they are, and compact the curriculum. So we identify what are the priority standards that need to be taught. But before we can get there, we need to build a connection with our kids and make sure that we know who they are and where they are, and make sure they're safe and ready to learn. So we need to connect with them to make sure they're ready to learn. And then one of the things that I think is also interesting about this whole social distancing, the phrase social distancing is really the wrong phrase. The phrase is physical distancing. So we are going to physically distance, but we are still going to create opportunities and promote social interaction. we're going to have to do that while maintaining physical distance. But we do care and we want our kids to socialize and we want them to connect with each other. And so part of the curriculum is going to focus on that. So I think that's it. I don't know if any board members have any questions about that. I didn't talk about child nutrition. Lunches will continue. Lunch and breakfast, we will be serving lunch and breakfast. And if you choose to, if we end up in a hybrid model, which might mean kids come to school 2 days, so I didn't talk much about that. Hybrid model where we can only accommodate, we have to accommodate fewer children in the school at one time. And so if that was the case, then we'd have half of our class in the school for a couple days and the other half in the school for a couple days. When they're not here, they would have access to the distance learning. And under any model that we're in, whether you opt out and want to stay home, whether it's hybrid model or full distance learning, we're going to still be serving breakfast and lunch. So ever since March 13th, when we went home, we continued to serve breakfast and lunch every day. We will continue to do that as the school year starts, regardless of what model we're in. So if you choose to keep your child home or if we're in a hybrid model, or if we're forced to be home, we'll still make lunches available, lunch and breakfast available. So I think that's it.
I just wanted to add that if anybody has questions or comments, they can email them to Buell, BUELL, @brooklandsschools.org, or call in to the meeting at 860-774-9732, extension 1, during public comment time, which we'll get to towards the end of the agenda. And we'll give you the number. Okay.
May, can you hear me?
All right. So the next item for new business, we have talked about, so as we continue to use Chromebooks and we continue to put these in the hands of our students, and especially because we need to be prepared to pivot from in-class instruction to home, we need to make sure that every child has a Chromebook or some device. So we have spent some of the money that we will expect for some of our CARES Act in order to prepare us for that distance learning model. And so that means we have Chromebooks in kids' hands. One of the things that we have to plan for is Chromebook damage. And so we have, many districts have, and we've discussed with the administrative team a couple times about the option of like a $20 insurance coverage. So if your Chromebook gets lost or the screen cracks, do we want to ask for a $20 insurance coverage that would help us to offset the cost of the repairs, because they do become expensive. So I think it's something that we want to think about as a board. That money would get set aside. One of the things that other districts have talked about is if a child was to pay $20, let's say 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, at the end of 8th grade, they've now put in $80. And if their Chromebook hasn't been damaged at all, do we just sell them the Chromebook at a reduced price? And I think that's it's a nice option to consider. And it would be my recommendation that we request a $20 insurance policy if parents can't afford it or choose not to. So if a family says, nope, I'm not going to pay it, and their child has significant damage to a Chromebook or loses it, they would be assessed a partial charge for replacing it. If there's a family that can't afford it, we could work out a sliding fee scale if we want to. So it's something that I think we should consider. Might not be a conversation for tonight unless the board wants to take that up. Any questions on that?
But you recommend, we can discuss this later, you're just.
I think we can. I think it's worth thinking about, and we'll be back together in August. So I think that we could have that conversation in August.
Okay.
All right. The next item is that there is a change in the minimum wage. So on September 1st, the minimum wage goes from $11 an hour to $12 an hour. So what that means for us is that as we think about substitute teachers, I'm just going to get my notes here. As we think about substitute teachers, sub-paras receive minimum wage. Certified teacher substitutes receive $12.14 an hour or $85 a day. So there's not much difference between a substitute para who's not certified and a substitute teacher who is certified making $12.14 an hour. So that's the only question. And then a certified sub that's a certified teacher gets paid $95 a day, which is $13.57 an hour. So I think we might want to talk about increasing that rate. Now, the one exception is that we do have a shorter day next year. So if the daily rate stays the same for subs, they actually are getting paid the same, but working fewer hours. So because they don't necessarily need to be here for the planning instruction, planning period. So it's just something to think about. You know,
I know we've done it in the past and looked at what area towns are paying. So we need to be competitive or people will choose to go to a different school. We won't have enough subs.
right.
So we might want to take a look at that, what other area towns are paying.
Okay, I'll bring that information back at our next meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll discuss that in August. Okay.
All right. Let's see. All right, the next one is the calendar update. So the Connecticut State Board of Education passed a resolution to waive up to 3 days of school of the school year to provide staff and families with additional time for learning how to address the COVID world. So our students have 182 days. I think that if we were to use 3 additional days for professional development, I think it would be a good thing for our staff. So I've talked to the administrative team who also feels, and the nurses who we need to prepare for staff to be able to respond to this. So it's my proposal that we were initially, last month you took action on the calendar to change the first 2 days of school as PD. So now I'm asking that we increase it to the first 5 days of school for professional development opportunities. So that would be August 24th until August 28th, Monday through Friday, would be professional development days, and the first student day would be Monday, August 31st. So that would be my proposal that I'd like you to consider. It still would give us enough days and enough hours of instruction. If we were able to add 3 PD days, I think that it would be helpful.
Now, does that have any impact on the teacher's contract? They're working up to 187.
They're still
Remember-
going to work the same number of
So
days.
they'll work the same number of days, they'll just put more into PD. That
Yes.
makes sense.
So I think we would,
Want a motion today to do that?
I think it would be good. That way we can push that out and let parents know for sure that we're changing the start date.
So we're
Okay.
I'll
looking,
move that we amend the school calendar to reflect the superintendent proposals,
179 student days.
179.
From August 24th to August 28th would be the professional development, correct? The first day of
Yes.
school starting August 31st.
Yep, Monday, August 31st, be the first day of school. Okay, so motion by Justin. Do we have a second? Second by Melissa. Any discussion, comments? All in favor? Okay. I didn't hear from Keith. but-
I know Carolyn and Keith.
I think it's
Yeah,
on the-
Carolyn and
Says
Keith.
aye. Aye. Okay. They
I
vote.
think-
Oh, okay.
I think Karen over in it.
I don't think my
In
mic
there.
is working. Can you hear me?
I don't think she can see.
So we're all in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed. Great.
Let's see. The next item was, is the question of building use by outside agencies. So we have policy that allows other agencies, so Parks and Recreation, scouting organizations, Parks and Rec offers some like adult exercise classes and craft classes, those kinds of things. So one of the questions is, and this has come up not just in Brooklyn, but other districts, is what is the impact of bringing outside people into the school? So we've worked really hard at not allowing visitors into the building, not ensuring that students are in their cohorts. The question is, what do we need to do to safely bring people into the building? And do we want to take that risk to do that? And so as much as we'd like to open the buildings, I worry a little bit about that. I think that in order for an outside agency to use a classroom, let's say a scouting group was to use our cafeteria, we would need to ensure that the cafeteria was clean before they got in, that they're following the procedures and the guidelines, and that when they were done, we would need to then go back in and clean and disinfect, because part of the mitigation strategies is the cleaning, which includes cleaning and disinfecting. So those things right now, as long as it's a nonprofit or a local town organization, then we're not charging for those. So there's a couple ways you can think about that. One is, do we want to open the doors? And then do we continue to do it at no cost, or is there some other consideration? So as much as I want to have the buildings open, I do worry a little bit about during the pandemic time that I would consider suspending the board policy around building use to restrict the requirement, or restrict the use, or to add additional requirements around that.
I think that makes sense. It also adds another cohort for the students if they miss scouts this year or something like that. It's that much less exposure for the children too.
I
So
agree.
I think it makes sense.
Mhm.
So do we want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we either stop or put in higher precautions. What do you, I guess I would.
I would say restrict
I would
access
say-
to this.
Yeah,
Restrict
yeah,
access.
Yeah, I think it's just,
So someone's gonna have to amend the motion, or the initial motion, the initial motion was to restrict access. So if we're gonna do that, or if you want to amend, so that's kind of how this will have to go.
Restrict access, right?
Sorry. All right.
and I'll second that.
Okay, so motion by Tana, seconded by Melissa. Any discussion? Any further discussion about?
What kind of restrictions? Completely, no
No
one can use the
access.
building at
Not,
all?
no use of the building during.
Outside of school,
During
during,
this time.
at least during the pandemic. And it just
Is
creates
that a
another,
minimal impact? I mean, how many different groups really use it?
it
What
just
are they?
creates another layer though of
Oh, I agree,
um,
I agree.
you know,
yeah.
of not knowing. And
There-
it sounds like they're working so effortfully in the school to keep the cohorts to a minimal amount and
Right.
to disinfect as needed. It's just another cost, and it's complicated. And does that potentially leave the
tracking-
town up
Tracking every person that
to
comes in and out.
liability attached to?
So it's too
I mean,
complicated.
these-
Even if you were to charge a fee, it would be too complicated.
These buildings get a lot of use.
Mhm.
Oh, yes. they do.
Daily,
Yeah.
use and evening and afternoon. So it will impact a lot of groups, and that's,
It's probably better we just close it to nothing but school then.
Yeah.
So with the one exception of before and after school for the park and recreation. That, I
That's for
think,
Brooklyn students.
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. That's to facilitate their education, really.
So I guess we have to vote on
I
that.
think
motion.
if we can narrow our focus to the education piece, we're going to have a hard enough time doing that without extending to
Right, right.
outside groups.
Right.
So all in favor of restricting use?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? I didn't.
I'm watching.
I'm not sure if Carolyn or
I didn't-
Pete were able to vote.
Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Voted.
Can you hear me?
Hold on, Carolyn.
I'll go as an aye.
There she is.
Oh, there it is. You're in favor?
Yes.
Nod? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. So that takes care of that unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
The next piece is a request that I have received from a parent or parents for the Board of Education to consider payment for high school other than our designated high school. As you know, we do have many high schools, public high schools that we do allow students to attend, but do not provide transportation to. This school is the Marinapolis Prep School, which is not a public school, does not abide by the same requirements of public schools. So I have been asked to bring this forward. One of the arguments that, or counter arguments that the parent has requested is that we pay for tuition to Woodstock Academy, which the parent has referred to as a private school. We pay for tuition to NFA, which they consider to be a private school. Neither one of them are a private school fully. They are recognized by the state and they follow the state guidelines for length of the school year. There are some differences, but it is not the same as a private school. They do not have the same, our designated high schools. So first of all, our Board of Ed policy does identify we pay tuition to our designated high schools for any child. And then beyond that, the board would need to consider tuition. So that has been brought to me, and the parent would like some feedback from the Board of Education.
So Patty, I'm requesting that you seek legal guidance on this issue.
So I have consulted with the district attorney around this, and there's a clear recommendation that the Board of Education should not be engaging in the tuition to that type of a private school, any private school, and that our designated high schools and NFA do not qualify as a private school. So there is a recommendation not to pay tuition. The Board of Education does have the ability to discuss this, but I think that we should be following the recommendation of our legal counsel.
Okay.
I agree. Does anybody have any additional questions? They understand, you all understand what the issue is.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, I will reply to the parent and let them know that I raised this point and that the board has weighed in on this. That we will deny the request to pay tuition for Marinapolis for those students.
Do we need to make that an official vote?
The next piece is May approval of superintendent's contract.
Right. As you remember, last meeting, we went into executive session and we did the review of our superintendent. We talked about renewing her contract with a rolling 3-year contract that we've been doing. We talked about the increasing the salary and the copay for insurance. I think that we should go ahead and renew the contract at this time and hope that Mrs. Buell stays. Does anybody have any questions about the contract? I think you all saw it last
We all-
month.
yeah, we all
Yes, we all
discussed
it. We all saw
discussed
it, so-
Yes.
If there's no questions on it, if somebody want to make a motion that we would renew her contract, that would be great.
I'll move that we renew the superintendent's contract.
I'll second it.
A motion by Justin, seconded by Melissa. Any questions or discussion about the contract or the terms with the contract? It will be on file at the town hall for the next month if anybody wants to review it. So all in favor of approving the superintendent's contract?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Abstentions? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Buell. We appreciate your leadership.
Thank you. So I have received some communication here that, is Keith trying to speak during this meeting? Yes. He's shaking
Can you
his
hear me
head. He's
now?
in full control.
Can you hear me?
Muted.
Hold on. Let's see.
Yeah, I see his mouth moving, but I can't hear him.
You're the host, so you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm talking, but you can't hear me.
I can't hear you. Yeah.
But the one we can see you talking on, can you hear me?
I can't hear him.
The one you can, it says that you're muted
No,
on the one that I can see you.
no, but he's on mute. So, oh, how about your, oh, hold on. Let's see.
I see you twice. One of them I can see you talking, the other is a picture.
Hold on, we're
of
gonna
you.
try to unmute you. You still have the host control of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Do you know how to sign? Oh, sorry. No, no. Oh, Keith, you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
It's your computer. Right?
Yeah, turn your
Turn your volume
volume
up.
up.
That's all I did.
All the way up.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can.
You can hear me now? Okay, good. Yay.
Keith, is there anything we need to go back to?
The only thing I was gonna, I don't know if you can still hear me. The only thing I was going to say when May mentioned if you want to speak during public comment, which I know is coming up, is in Zoom, you're able to raise your hand as well, which we can see you there. So for those of you who've dialed in through Zoom, you can click the raise my hand when the public comment comes up, and we'll field questions that way too.
Thank
That's
you.
all I was gonna say. And I've been agreeing with all the motions. The only other thing that I asked about was, do we need to take an official motion on the Marianapolis discussion? Because we just all kind of said yes, but we didn't really take an official vote.
Hi, this is Jeff. I didn't see that item on the agenda, and this is a special meeting. So if it's not on the agenda, it can't be discussed in this meeting. Taking a vote on it now would be sort of bass backwards.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Unmuted. Okay. So we are at public comments. I don't know if anyone has any comments, but they are free to call in at 860-774-9732, extension 1.
Yeah, someone's already raising their hand up there.
How do we unmute them? Keith has to do that?
Kelly.
Yeah, I can do
Okay.
that. Okay, so we have So we have a couple of raised hands. The first one is Becky, and if you could, please just state your full name before you start talking, that'd be great. So Becky, I'm going to allow you to talk here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I wanted to, I called
Becky,
the
can you
rec-
state your full name first before you
Oh,
start?
sure. It's
Thanks.
Becky Knox.
Thanks.
And I'm a parent that's going to have trouble getting my kids to school with the time differential. And when we got the letter informing us there may be a program for us, I called the rec department to see if I could, get some more information. And they told me that they weren't going to have a program like that. Was that something that was discussed afterwards that might have been corrected? They told me it was going to be a conflict of interest for them to have a before and after school program and a half-hour differential for parents that were going to need help.
I can't hear exactly everything she's saying, but yes, this program with the rec came out of comments and concerns from parents, and it's something that the town has worked with the school to provide, and then delaying the start of school presented another problem. So we're gonna, that's when the cooperation with the town came into play to offer that program.
Okay. Yeah, because like I said, when I called the rec department, they said that program could not be established. So I thought maybe they weren't aware of what was being offered or what was being told to us.
So thank you for your comment. We'll May, I don't know if you heard that, May, but she was just saying the rec department doesn't appear to know about the program yet.
I'll work on it.
Okay, so thank you, Becky, for the comment. We appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
So we have another question from Kelly. So Kelly, I'm going to turn you on here. Go ahead. If you want to state your full name, please.
Sure, it's Kelly Cotting. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Okay,
Yes.
I was just wondering, I know that we all received the one-page summary of the plan, but I was wondering if there was plans to either post or disseminate the complete plan as submitted to the state so that we can read specifics.
No idea what she said.
It's on the
She wants
website,
to
the
know
whole
the plan,
plan.
if we're gonna post the
Yeah.
plan.
It's already
It's on the
posted.
website.
Yeah, the plan is on the website.
I don't mean the one-page plan. I'm talking like the complete plan as submitted to the state of Connecticut.
I thought it was the whole thing, but it will be. If it's not,
We'll check into that, and if it's not the full plan, we'll update it.
Excellent, thank you.
It's on the what site?
Town.
The town's website. Okay, it's also on the town's website.
Okay,
Thanks, Kelly.
thank you.
I don't have any other hands that are raised yet on Zoom. I don't know if you have if you got any emails or phone calls that came in.
Well, this is Jeff. I have a couple of questions if I could go into them now.
Go for it.
Mrs. Buell, I wondered if prior academic performance of students is going to be considered in assigning them to cohorts. Seems to me this is a great opportunity to group together students of comparable academic performance rather than having these low-performing homogeneous groupings that we have in normal times.
That makes sense.
I disagree.
Second point, the plan, the complete plan, which is on the town's website, says that the start time for school is 9:30, not 9:15.
thank you.
And the other thing that I was a little worried about is that I know of a neighboring school district which is concerned that it may not have enough substitute teachers should one or two cases of virus or just people isolating themselves, we can quickly run out of substitute teachers. That district is considering changing the requirements for substitute teachers from a college degree to a high school diploma so as to broaden the population of potential substitute teachers. And of course, there is the whole question of the minimum wage that plays into this also, but it seems to me that both of those items are worth a little further study.
I'd be happy to comment on that. Do you mind?
Please, I can't, I didn't even hear it all.
So I do want to comment on the idea of subs. So the state has changed the requirement and is allowing substitutes to be high school graduates. So it does broaden the pool for sure. So I am concerned about what happens when multiple people get sick. Am I even going to have enough staff to run the school? So that definitely is a concern. Under the current NDDH guidelines, people who are demonstrating symptoms of COVID have to go home and quarantine for 10 days. It's going to create a real difficult hardship for families who have sick kids who go home for 10 days and for staff who need to go home for 10 days. So there's significant impact. And I think that is going to be some of the challenge as we move forward about maintaining full reopening and having all kids in. So we may run out of staff, we may run out of students, there may be large groups of people being quarantined. There's definitely issues with all of those pieces. So there's definitely a concern. Along those lines, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Otto, were you done?
Well, I just wonder if there's need to begin to take some action rather than just being concerned about the possibility that action will have to be taken in the future.
Yes, so we're in the process of hiring teachers. So one of the questions that came in was about hiring teachers. And so I'd like to respond to that. Chuck Hart asked a question, but in the process of hiring teachers, we'll post, our substitute posting stays open on a regular basis. And as people get into the sub pool, we bring them in and interview them. Our principals stay on top of that. So we are really in the middle of interviewing for a variety of positions. So anybody listening that would like to apply, if you go to the Brooklyn Public Schools webpage, under job opportunities, you will be able to apply. Chuck Hart asked a question. He said that we're looking to hire new teachers. Is that the case? Are all the current teachers returning for the school year? So we are hiring because we need to create some additional space for students to spread out. And we've had some retirements and some resignations. So we do have some vacancies that we're working on filling right now. If there are any teachers, which we're not aware of right now, that for whatever reason are unable to return, we will then be trying to fill those positions. So we're in the process of gathering that information from our employees who may have impacted ability to return to work. So we're actively working with employees on that.
I've got two other questions that came up on Zoom too, Patty, unless you've got more that you want to read.
Go ahead, I can read. You can go and then I'll go.
Okay, so we've got Joanne Lambert. Joanne, I'm going to unmute you here and allow you to talk. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So I have a question on the equity. If a parent is choosing to partake in distance learning as they do not want to send their children to school, how are those children going to be evaluated and graded? Because when we did the distance learning in the spring, it was a pass fail. So is there going to be the same type of grading system and assessment system between kids who are actually in the building and kids who are distant learning?
So I just asked permission from the board chair to respond to questions. Typically during public comment, it is not a question and answer session, but given this situation, we're going to be allowed to respond to these questions. So yes, students will be graded in the same fashion that students in school, so they'll be given the same assignments and the same grading system.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thanks.
We have so we have another question from Amy Landis. Amy, you want to go ahead?
Okay. Hi. So Patty and the board, I had a few questions which I wasn't expecting necessarily an answer tonight, but it sounds like you may have changed that a little bit. So a couple of the questions I had is, and then you may not know the answer, do we know yet what might happen with band and if that's going to happen in the middle school and with sports? Has any decisions been made or is that still fluid and we need more time?
So band will not happen. So there'll be music instruction, but no band instrumental instruction. And athletics, we are still working with the CIAC around any guidance they have. I do not anticipate traveling out of town. If we're going to keep all these kids cohorted as well during the day, I do not anticipate mixing with other towns, but we'll provide more guidance once we make some determinations about that.
Okay. And how about parent drop-off, Patty? It sounds like we're going to have more families dropping off kids. Is the process going to need changing in the morning to facilitate a large number of parents dropping off their children?
Yeah, we're working on that for both of the schools. You'll be receiving, just like everyone will receive some additional guidance. So we're still talking about what the best way to do that is. We're talking about some changes to the bus drop off as well as parent drop off. So it's going to be mostly the same, just some additional drop off locations, and students will be entering through different doors depending on their grade level in order to spread out the students so that they're not all trying to get through the same door at the same time. So that's our first focus. We do anticipate that arrival and dismissal will be very slow for quite a while, but that's because we're going to take health and safety first.
Okay. And then in regards to subs, is that process going to be the same, or are you still using the automated system to contact subs about jobs that are available?
We'll still use the same system. Yes, that works out well for us.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Amy.
I have a question, Keith.
Go ahead.
Okay. I have a question from Michelle Parmiter asking about building restrictions and will the PTO be able to use the building for meetings? I would say no, based on the fact that we're reducing the number of visitors into the building. So it doesn't matter if they're parents for PTO. I know it's a school organization, but I think that the answer is no. Just looking to see if there's any more. Oh, looks like I have a couple more. Michelle Parmiter has additional questions here. I know you mentioned no singing and playing wind instruments during music class. Has a decision been made regarding BMS band at this time? I just answered that. To add to that, if one chooses to distance learn, will they still have the opportunity to be included in band? So there won't be a band. Obviously you wrote these before I answered. How are the cohorts being chosen? Just the same as they've always been chosen in the past. So class lists are determined by the sending group of teachers in order to determine fitting student needs and friendships. And, you know, we've gotten some requests from parents that if kids are going to be cohorted all day, we hope that they're with one of their friends. And so teachers, when they have those conversations, are, you know, they do take that in consideration. So groups, the whole team of teachers meets to talk about good matches and challenging matches when you group kids together. And sometimes that's based on academics, sometimes it's based on friends and overall kind of mix of students. Let's see. So the one other thing that I would mention about cohorts, when we pivot to a hybrid model, we will have an A, so that one cohort of kids will be broken into two. So there'll be an A group and a B group. And so we've begun to look at that grouping. Our goal would be that families that have children in multiple grades will all have the same A cohort regardless of the grade, or the B cohort regardless of the grade. So that way a parent knows their children, regardless of their grade, go to school on the same day. And while we're talking about that, our plan does say that Friday, so students would go AB Monday, Tuesday, I'm sorry, AA Monday, Tuesday, BB Wednesday, Thursday, with Friday as the day that all students would be home. We are looking at that because we're going to try to make that decision regionally for a while, the region, including our sending high schools. We're talking about that day being Friday. It looks like that might be shifting to Wednesday. So again, this is an organic plan that is changing, and we're trying to stay on top of this. This is a conversation that, again, was had today. Third question, looks like we already answered about sports. We don't know the answer. Can a student who distance learns participate in the school team? Again, that's another one of those questions that we're talking about. There are districts out there that are saying yes, there are districts saying no. I'm not sure how, you know, if a family chooses to keep their child home to avoid cohorts of kids, whether or not they'd even be sending their kids into a mixed cohort as an athletic team. But I think that once we get a little bit more guidance from the CIAC about that, I think we can make some determinations about that. You have any questions? No. I have another question from Chuck Hart. If a teacher needs to quarantine and their students also have to quarantine, are they going to be considered homesick, or will they distance learn? So great questions. So again, that's why we need to be prepared to shift directions or pivot directions at any moment. That's why we want to have Chromebooks, one-to-one devices in their hands. We're almost there with one-to-one devices in our district. And so if we have to quarantine, we send everyone home with their devices. And as long as the teacher's healthy, they can teach from home if they're in quarantine. And if the kids are healthy, they can participate in their distance learning. So it would count as a school day, and students would be expected to log into their school day. So again, these are pieces that we're all putting in place so that if tomorrow we had to shift and pivot to a different model of instruction, that parents will know what that looks like, kids will know how to log into the website or to the site where they're going to receive their education or access the learning tools for their education. Good questions. Board of Ed question, one more, let's see. Almost all medical business offices require temperature checks. Even such places like lake compounds to open require temperature checks. Why isn't the school performing temperature checks on children and employees at the start of the day? Great question. Under guidance from the State Department of Education and with their medical experts, they have they have indicated that I think the biggest concern, first of all, it's not a strong enough indicator for them. It's not a strong enough predictor. And I think that becomes impacted when kids are on the bus waiting to get off or waiting in the heat or in the cold to get into a building. So their temperatures would fluctuate. So if we're socially distanced trying to get into the building and we're having to stop and check each temperature on the way in, that they feel like that is not a productive use of time or a strong enough indicator. That being said, we will have multiple touchless thermometers throughout the building. So if we suspect that a child has a fever, that it's going to be easy enough to take that. I also am in discussions about having a thermometer available as staff enter, that they could self-monitor if they're just not sure, they want to take it. We're not saying it's a requirement at this time, but if they choose to take their temperature on the way in, then so all staff are going to be asked that they, by walking through the door, they're assuring us that they're healthy, that they don't have the symptoms. And so if a staff member would like to, they can go ahead and take a quick temp check. Good questions. Let's see.
I don't have any more on Zoom, Patty, so anything that you have.
Yeah, I think I've gotten them all.
This is Jeff. I've got a couple more, if you're clear on others. In the event that a case of the virus shows up in school and the cohort and at least one teacher is exposed, you've talked about the cohorting of the students as being an aid to contact tracing. Is the school assuming responsibility for contact tracing outside the school setting?
No. So we will be working with our local Department of Health, who will be responsible for the contact tracing. So we would let them know we've got a case, and if there's any questions, if our school nurses have any questions, but our school nurses are in direct communication with NDDH about any cases that pop up or suspected cases.
Okay, that's fine. I had another one, but I can't find it, so I'll skip it for tonight.
So I have another question. Kristen Schetzel, and I'm glad you brought this up because so I think it was more to me, but I'm going to respond to it anyways. So one of the things that has come up, and I had prepared to speak to this during my last, at the last board meeting, and just slipped my mind tonight. I think that our plan, and you've seen it in pictures, shows that student deaths are, right now, we have about like 14 to, in some cases, 16 or 17 students in a classroom. So the obvious question comes up, I'm just finding my notes. The obvious question comes up about social distancing and how far do we have to social distance and what are the guidelines? So the state guidelines vary, although they say we're going to follow the CDC guidelines of 6 feet social distancing. But then there are also times when they say about the bus, you can put near capacity. Obviously, we're not 6 feet. If we are in the classrooms and they're 3 to 4 feet apart, they're not 6 feet apart. And so there are concerns, and we all have some concerns about that. If the guidance is 6 feet, are we honoring 6 feet? And so one of the things that I would share, and this has nothing to do with the question that came up, but we are looking at those pieces. And when I submitted the plan to the state, I did say there are still some trouble spots when we're trying to plan for a healthy learning environment. We're not able to attain a 6 foot distance. I share that with the state. I also shared with the state there are other times that it becomes challenging, like the bus, like fire drills. Now, clearly, if there was a fire in the building, we want them to evacuate, and 6 feet goes out the window. But we do have to try to maintain physical distance between kids and staff as much as possible, because this is about everybody being healthy and being available to teach and learn. So there are some concerns around the distance. We are not required to have 6 feet between the desks. We're supposed to maximize the space or the distance that we can create. So just so that folks know, every day we have numbers that change of how many kids are coming to school. Sometimes kids say families will say they're gonna send them, and sometimes they change and say, no, we're gonna distance learn, or we may have thought they were gonna distance learn and they said, no, we're sending our kids to school. Parents have the right to make that choice, and they have the right to change their mind. And once school starts, if you're in a distance learning model and you say, I think it looks like everything's going well, I want to send my kid back now, we need a little bit of time, 72 hours to get ready. If it's sooner, we'll get them in sooner, but at least a 72-hour window to make sure that we have things in place. But on the school side of things, we're also looking at spreading the students out as much as possible, as much as we possibly can, spreading them out. So I'll give you some quick numbers just so that you have some understanding. Sorry, I don't see it here. We have about 100 students right now that have opted out either for home schooling or for distance learning. And so those are spread throughout different grade levels. So some grade levels have more, some have less. And so when we look at that, if I have some really large grade levels, and we've added some teachers into grade levels in order to create smaller class sizes, but if they're still pretty big and they're tight, then we're looking at, what if we use the gymnasium for one of those classes? So for example, if I have 8th grade, I have 73 students in 8th grade at this point. And I have, so that's a large class size when I spread those out. But if I were to take a larger group of kids, so if there are 4 sections and I take a larger group of kids and put them in the gymnasium where they can spread out more, I have 3 smaller classes and 1 larger class. So everybody has more distance between their peers. So although the gymnasium is not our ideal instructional setting, it does provide opportunities for increased physical distancing between students and teachers. We could look at the gymnasium, we could look at the cafeteria, we could look at library spaces. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. And it's too early to give you numbers because they change by the minute. As a result of tonight's meeting, some parents might say, I feel comfortable, let's send them in. And some parents might say the opposite. I'd like to distance learn because I'm not comfortable. And we respect everybody's decision. We want to support you in whichever decision you make. We're here to support students, families, and our educators because we all do this together. Let's see, looks like I have one more question. I'm wondering how, so Christy Sandstone says, I'm wondering how often the children will have the opportunity to move and how much they will be asked to stay at their desks. What is the plan for movement? So we understand that kids aren't going to be in their desk all day. So we've shortened the instructional day. It's going to be a 6-hour day. We're going to have arrival and dismissal. We're going to have lunch. We're going to have breaks, mask breaks, the ability to go outside for those mask breaks, and lunch and recess. So I think that the children are going to have time for movement. And I think that we're looking at other opportunities where teachers might take a stretch break. I think we do that now. I think they may do that. It's just going to have to be physically distanced. Some students may need to take an additional mask break. Maybe they have a health condition that they can't keep their mask on for a full 2 hours. So they might need to have a different accommodation built in for them. So those are the things that we're looking at. So it's not I'm not dictating to people about the breaks, but we are looking for movement in the classroom as well as out. I have another question. Amy Chase, what efforts are being made to meet the emotional needs of students during the pandemic? Will social workers meet individually with students? Will there be increased attention to the mental health via curriculum, et cetera? So when we talk about social emotional learning and social emotional learning curriculum, we have adopted some social emotional learning curriculum. Some of the professional development will be for all teachers before school starts. And we are looking at that. We understand that children have come from different situations. By the time they get back, they will have spent 5 months away from school in different settings. I think that there are some adults who need some social emotional supports right now after dealing with all the things that they're dealing with. So we know that children need that. We understand that children, some understand it, some don't understand it, some misunderstand it. So we know that we need to support children. So that is definitely a focus. And in both the middle school and the high school, we have an entry period at the very beginning of the day, which will be that primary focus of getting to know kids, connecting with kids, and supporting their emotional well-being. So that's a really big focus for all of us. That's it for now.
Patty, I do have one question that I don't think has been addressed.
As far as kids and wearing masks, you said that preschool does not have to wear masks, but everybody else does.
Yeah.
Have they given any added guidance as to why that is the case? Also, with the schools not being air conditioned in the classrooms, I know that in past years, I've brought in personal fans, but if they can't have fans blowing around and kids are stuck in masks, are our teachers going to be trained in oxygen deprivation or heat stroke, which are added concerns when you're putting a mask on your face and you're adding that heat and, and for asthmatic kids as well. I know you said that there can be some accommodations for removal of mask as needed, but I know that it can get pretty hot in those classrooms in those early months as school is starting. And if they're having to sit in there with no air circulating around in the masks, what do we have in place for the safety of that?
Sure, good question.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a question, just something that I don't think has been brought up.
So those are good questions. We've had those questions with the nurses. It's been ongoing conversation with them. We've talked about how do we help students to understand and not become overheated. Sometimes it's at recess. Sometimes they come in, they run so hard, they play so hard, and then they come in, they're overheated. They don't even know that they're, getting overheated. So the nurses are going to help to provide some guidance or look-fors for teachers to help monitor that for students. We know that there's no air conditioning here. We know that's not an option. Personal fans are not an option unless they're blowing air out. That will create some air movement. It's just not going to blow on the person. It's going to create some movement within the air in the building. So, we're going to have to do just like we've done other years. So there have been times, there was at least one occasion where it was, like this week, if it was 100 degrees, we might not be here for a full day. So it might require us to have an early dismissal. So we're going to have to monitor that on a day-by-day basis. The daily opening up of the building and getting at the air exchange before kids get here, after kids leave. We know that a lot of times in the morning, it's a little cooler, like this morning was very nice. That would be a day where you'd open, besides the air exchange, we're just going to open up the building, drop the building down a little bit, the temperature down a little bit. but there's no simple answer. Last year, the board did ask me to get a quote for air conditioning, and it was not something that we could even entertain. So I think that, you know, we're going to have to monitor that day to day. One of the things that I have talked to the nurses about is the possibility of like outside, putting like a mister outside so students could cool down. If they're outside and it's a nice hot day, maybe getting them the opportunity to have some cool water misting on them. So I think for not a lot of money, we could put something out there that might help students to regulate their own body temperature. The question about pre-K, why pre-K doesn't need it, and why the older kids do have to wear the mask. It's not articulated in this plan. I think in the new guidance that we received today, although if you go on the website, you can read it for yourself. That's the Adapt, Achieve, Advance, Achieve plan. It's a new addendum to that plan that was put in there. I think it's related to how much difficulty children will have putting masks on and then having to take masks off, and that people would have to help them put them on and put them off. I think that's part of it. I think it's the amount of touching they do and licking of their masks. I think older kids will do that too. But yeah, I think that's what it's related to, and just their ability to actually manage with the mask on. But then the only other thing I wanted to just say is that students, let's say a student with asthma, it's not necessarily removing their mask as needed, but not in the classroom. If they need to have a mask, an additional mask break, they would have to leave the classroom to go outside to have a mask break, because what we're trying to do is ensure that in the guidelines is that we're keeping in the school, in the classroom, masks on. So at this time, that's what it looks like. I have another question. Monica St. Jean, are you going to be asking for their decision on an in-person versus distance learning? Are we supposed to be contacting someone to alert you of our decision? So we did send a survey home, and so some parents have already responded to that. Almost 400 people have replied to that. We're going through that list right now, but I welcome anybody that has any, we're assuming that students are going to be in school unless we hear differently. So if families are choosing a different option, then yes, please let us know, and we'll send some more communication out. I think that our initial survey was to get a sense of how many students might or might not return to school. But we're kind of ticking through that list to see how many are still serious about those initial decisions. And then as we go, we'll send some reminders out. Please let us know if you're going to request an alternate education, or if you're choosing to homeschool. So we will send some more reminders out, but if you know right now, please go ahead and send that in. That would be great. That's it.
So we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
You're on mute. Hold on, you guys are on mute over there.
Oh, I have to.
All right, so we can entertain now a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, thank you everybody for coming and for your thoughtful comments.
Thank you. Keith, I think you need to end.
Hand it back over to you. Night, everyone.
Good night, thank you. You can just end it, Keith. You don't have to send it back to me.